everybody. Happy Thursday. This is when we're recording. Welcome to another session of Awaken Your Relationships. I am Julie Murphy, the money chick. But guess what? I have frozen. Have you frozen?
You have frozen for me. I don't see you. I mean, I see you, but you're not moving. Fortunately, it captured you in a very flattering frame. Are you still there? Did I lose you? Now you're gone for good. Well, everybody, until Julie gets back, I'm so glad you're here. You know, Julie is the money chick and I'm the relationship one. And through the years, we've been supporting one another and helping each other, just live life, which is what we're all supposed to do. You know, we're all supposed to show up for each other and bring our very own gifts and our very own specialties. And so today we were talking about, what happens when you start to move on. So when we get past all the stuff we've been carrying on our shoulders for 40 years, whether it was, our parents divorced or a narcissistic mother or a narcissistic father or some sort of abuse, emotional, physical, alcoholism, whatever it may be, when you've spent your whole life dealing with those sorts of issues and thinking this was your burden to carry, and you start to evolve and you start to grow, you have a whole new set of problems. And that's why Julie and I show up together, because you can be evolved, healthy, amazing, fantastic human beings and still have problems in areas like, your technology screwing up.
I was sitting there going, oh, I just have to delete the other one and get on the other one. I was like, oh my God, she's still live. This is great.
Great. Oh, no, I'm fine with this stuff. I'm like, woohoo, I have a stage.
Fine. Oh, this is fabulous. Oh my gosh. Thanks, everybody.
We just had a great one-sided conversation about what we were talking about before, of when you start taking off those chains of the past, suddenly you're confronted with a whole bunch of a new set of problems. But it doesn't mean that you're broken or that there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
Like that. Like, I'm great at interpersonal communications and healing, and you're great at money, but
Right.
you struggle with your relationship issues at times.
Yep.
We all do as part of that spiritual growth. And I've worked through a lot of that stuff. And so now I'm working on my money piece. People aren't broken if they have problems.
Well, and what I really want people to understand is that the energy moves, right? So when you work on the relationship piece, then all of a sudden you're making money decisions that don't work out. And then all of a sudden your health, something goes on your health. It's like this trifecta. It's the three. It's your relationships, your health, or your money, where we act things out if we don't work them out. And so if you feel like you're really doing well on the relationship stuff and it's growing and it's building, you probably got a leaky container in one of the other two areas of your world, the health or on the money front. And I really noticed this years ago when I had this client who came in and she had like $37,000 of credit card debt. And she's like, I know I'm way far behind in my retirement planning, but can you just like help me get to where I want to be? I'm like, great. And she was fit, she was good. And so a year later, fast forward, she comes in, her credit card debt got down to 15 grand. She did a great job. But she gained 20 pounds. And then she's like, yeah, I need to get this in a check. And then the next year she came in, she was up now up 30 pounds. So now it was significant. And her credit card debt was like down to nothing after 2 years. Well, then what happened is she decided to run an Ironman. Well, so she literally peeled the weight off in that year. Her credit card debt went back up to 28 grand.
What do you think happened? I mean, why do you think that happened for her? Why didn't she get the money stuff cleaned up and then move on to the next phase of cleaning up?
Because she wasn't living from her heart. She wasn't living from what her soul's desires were. And that's where we cracked the code.
Okay.
Right. So when we're really honest with ourselves and we really get to that place of like, what's true for me, no matter who you disappoint, no matter I heard this morning the phrase, you don't have to domesticate yourself for anybody any longer in the version that they want you to live, as opposed to the way that you actually want to live. So you've got all these people of like, I think about like, I pay alimony to my ex-husband and he's got all these expectations around that. And so do the courts. And so do, and I'm sitting here going, I can't live as free as a bird as I want. Like, why do we think that we can't like go back and renegotiate? Like if I have found like 3 years post-divorce, why do we feel like we can't go in and say, hey, life didn't really turn out the way I expected. Can we adjust this a little bit? Like so often we don't.
And
And
that's exactly what just happened to me, these last couple days is I, was smart enough last year to contact Julie and be like, hey, Julie, I need to start, I need to start getting out of this stuff. And that was the first step of me um, taking back my right to be financially stable and solvent. And then I
mhm.
started to get more support and I started to read more books. But it took like 9 months until my first installment of my a pandemic microloan I have was due today, and yesterday I talked to the person who's handling my retirement, and I said, this is due tomorrow, and I'm trying not to live on credit cards at all. I'm trying to, only pay from the cash that I have coming in, or find some other way or some other resource or source to motivate me to do this stuff. And I said, I've got this loan, this installment due tomorrow. And, I don't have the money for it. So I said, hey, we'll call together. We'll call the city together. So I'm like, oh my God, thank God. He's like, I'll talk if you want me to. I'm like, yes, I don't want to do any of this. So we did the 3-way call and we called the city, and, we talked to the person who's in charge of it. And of course and I knew intellectually this is what it would be. It's a small town. So every municipal worker is overworked. They don't care about all this other stuff. It's like if you don't pay your garbage bill and then 6 months go by and they go, hey, she hasn't paid her garbage bill yet. This is kind of how the town goes.
Yeah.
So, I knew that intellectually, but I had never negotiated for myself before. I'd never said I need to renegotiate this because this doesn't work for me.
So I would like to point out to those who are watching. So like when we stay in relationships that don't serve us because we just keep trying to fix it or people please it or whatever, there's a correlation to then also our debt, right? So the only reason that I have found, and people will say, Julie, this is not true. And I'm telling you, after 29 years of doing this, yes, it is true. So that's just you in denial, that when we create any kind of debt in our lives, it's you avoiding feeling your feelings. And so what happens is, so like you're in a situation right now that you have to pay this debt back. And by kicking the can on the debt or kicking because it's not accepting the reality that you're sitting in, right? And so it will kick up emotions that should have been felt a year ago when you didn't have the reserves to bridge yourself through the time period that we went through, right? So, and this is where it's so important for us to feel our feelings along the way, whether it's in relationship. It's like, if we actually looked at our relationships and actually, if I actually was honest with myself with the kind of marriage that I was in, I wouldn't have been married as long as I was, because I kept trying to fix it. I kept trying to go on, something's going to change, something's going to be different, as opposed to going, it is what it is. And do I think I would change it? No, I have 4 beautiful babies and I am grateful for that every day. But in the same token, I stayed a little bit longer than I probably should have. And that's okay. But we have to feel those feelings along the way, because when we don't and we stuff them down, it always comes out in some way or same. You watch this in relationships where it just builds and builds and builds, and all of a sudden you're blowing up at each other, right? When we're not actually honest with where it's at. And our debt works the exact same way. We are spending, and we have credit card debt and student loan debt because there's a grieving process that we didn't have the money in the first place to do what it is that our hearts desired to do in the first place. And there's this correlation. And so when we start to recognize going, oh, it's kind of over here, and it's kind of over here, and it's kind of over here. Like, it's not a surprise that, like, I am constantly reminded, think about this in relationships. I mean, there's very good medical reasons why people would use IVF as an example. But I have found after all these years of doing this that if a couple is really trying to do IVF, there's some underlying issue going on in that marriage that they are not talking about, and they're still trying to use their masculine energy to push the outcomes that they want, of their desired outcomes, and push, 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 push. And people will argue with me going, you know what, that's not really good and that's not true. But I can tell you there is something that is unresolved that is not being worked on a soul level. And I was reminded that of again recently, and it turned out, in this most recent example that, yeah, they actually, there was stuff going on, and it came out, and it acts out through our money or through our relationships. Like IVF is like 12 to 15 grand every time you do it. Like that's how it connects to your money, but there's something going on in your relationship, and you're spending more money and creating more financial duress because you're not addressing the thing of, it's not just physiologically that you can't get pregnant. It's usually your body intelligence is so damn smart. And are you listening or not? And that's a way that our body's just telling us something's not in alignment. It's not as easy. Like the unconscious version of that is going, oh, I just can't get pregnant, so I'm going to force myself to get pregnant. But there's something else going on. There always is. Every time I see this, I also see this when women who are single, who aren't married, they're freezing their eggs like crazy ladies. It's unbelievable. These successful women who are off the charts, income affluent, and they're building up their assets, and they're like rocking the world, and they're just like, I'm going to freeze my eggs, I'm going to force this. And then when it actually boils down to implanting those eggs, they're all like going, like, I still don't have the guy. Well, because you haven't shifted the stuff internally to attract the guy. Like, it's always something else. That's what I've seen this patterning. It's quite amazing to me. So if we can pay attention to some of these layers, it goes deeper. It really does.
And that's absolutely true, of money. Money's such a distraction, to our interpersonal relationships, with each other. How we set our boundaries, how we show up for ourselves, whether we believe that it's possible to show up for ourselves. This calling of the city the other day, I mean, it was a big deal for me because in the past I would have, found some way to do it that would have caused me more suffering.
Right.
Because I'm not someone who ever, I'm not someone who breaks promises. I'm not somebody who, shirks her responsibility. I'm not somebody who, just up and leaves. I keep working at it. And a lot of women are like that. It's as if we were told we're not good enough if we need support. But feminine energy is all about support. It's all about community and what we create together. And that's what we've lost, I think, as time has gone by.
Well, and every woman I know right now is going through her version of, how do I accept more? How do I allow? How do I receive? How do I follow my intuition above my logic? Right? And these are all the feminine traits, not the masculine traits of the logic and the pushing and the protecting. Like, I think about, like, me, even in my situation, like every decision that I've made post-divorce, I've been completely in my masculine energy trying to protect my kids because they weren't on my watch. And on so many levels, some of that has blown up in my face.
Yes.
Right? And because I actually need to be in my feminine energy, so think about it. We go back to your body intelligence, right? The feminine stuff is the left side of the body. The masculine stuff's on the right side. And Rita, I haven't even told you this, but one of the reasons I was gone a couple weeks ago is because I was in Vegas with a friend of mine who I used to do Awaken Your Health videos with. He analyzed my blood, and all of the physical issues I got going on in my body are all on the masculine side of my body. And none of them are major. They're all like, hello, pay attention. Hello, pay attention. And our bodies have all this information in it. And it's like, oh, so as I'm allowing and accepting all that arises and allowing just whatever is, and just being me, it's amazing on how the physical body then fixes itself because that's the messages that we're getting. But we have to be willing to surrender, which is another feminine thing, right? Surrender into, wow. I mean, I had to surrender into, I'm divorced. I don't get my kids 50% of their childhood. Like, this was hard stuff for me to swallow. It was, because no way, no how. What? Like, that was not an easy thing for me to accept. And it's fascinating to me, how when we're peeling this onion, there's the next layer of all that. And I had somebody say one time, when does it ever end? It doesn't. As long as you're alive, even in your 90s, that onion is still going to peel because your soul's evolving.
So I study Ken Wilber's stuff every so often, and he's all about transformational work and transformational theory. And there's lots of different models throughout the years, even as something as simple as Maslow's hierarchy of needs,
Mm-hmm.
same sort of thing, how we evolve and transform. And, the latest research about transformation is, you go past the self and then you start moving into being a leader of spiritual, movements and groups. And you just keep moving up the ladder. It's almost like a higher order of organization. We start with the amoeba, and then a higher order is a mammal, and a higher order is a person, and then the higher order is an individual, then a spiritual leader. Then, I mean, it's just more complex systems, and that's why it doesn't end. Because once you embrace this version of you, this human version of you, now you have to embrace all of humanity. That's
Right.
the next step. And then what happens when you do that? Now you need to embrace all of reality. I mean, it keeps getting bigger the more we just keep stretching to encompass more. And the universe is infinite. It doesn't end. So we're always going to be growing because, like the redwood tree, we're living and growing, and it doesn't stop. We're not supposed to, because that would really be horrible, I think.
Well, and you think about all these topics, like there's so much, and I have a feeling over the next couple months and years, there's going to continue to be this stretch and a bigger divider in terms of those who are surrendering and allowing and accepting and evolving, to those who are going to continue to take on more suffering cycles and more struggles and more, and they'll blame all the people who are not in that camp, right? And what I have come to learn is that if we continue to keep choosing those suffering cycles, the lessons keep coming until you shift to this other place, until you start to actually, and people say, well, Julie, what is that? I'm like, whatever makes you giggle. And people are like, and I don't mean to make it seem insignificant, but your giggle is so critically important, because I have found that to be the easiest place where people can recognize it, even though everything that we're talking about to some people seems like it's foreign. And you're like, what are you two ladies talking about? If you find your giggle and that's what you follow, and you keep doing more of what makes you giggle, no matter what, I guarantee you're doing exactly everything that we're talking about.
Well, this is kind of like the differences that people live their lives. And I was just thinking about soup. Some people will just be grateful there's any food on the table, even if the
Right.
soup is terrible.
Right.
Other people will settle for Campbell's soup, which, isn't too bad. But then there's a whole nother level of the grandmother that loved you, who knew how to cook and made homemade chicken soup from
The
homemade chicken
best.
stock from the chickens she got from the neighbor that raises them. There's a whole different depth of experience
Mhm.
that we can have, and we're focusing only on suffering and getting by. And what this big pandemic international suffering cycle is doing is on an international scale. It's encouraging people. It's making people choose. So people who were borderline, whether borderline personality or anything, people who are borderline are saying, who do I really want to be? Do I want to be downtrodden and oppressed, or do I want to be in a better place? And this
Right.
is kind of the wheat from the chaff. People are making their decisions. And on the Mayan calendar, every 5,000 years, humanity has a choice to either choose to evolve or choose to stay where they're at. And it's almost like the good versus evil. It's
Right.
almost like the Armageddon sort of thing. And people have the free will to choose. Do you
Right.
want to get out of suffering, or do you want to stay in the ego, conflict, emotional violence place?
Yep. And every day we wake up and we have that choice.
Yep.
So even if we've chosen something up to this point, like I even had this conversation with a client where, I could tell they were going down their suffering pattern, and I called them up because they had some other insurance person just bamboozle the shit out of them and talk them into untangling all this stuff. Like literally, it was fascinating to me because the husband had just gotten fired from his job, and the wife then decided, and she's got all this feeling, I will say, about that and opinions about him losing his job and the reasons why and all that. But then she was the one directing all the finances in the household. And then she directed him to go to this insurance person. This insurance person then totally revamped everything. And like she was destroying their financials while he was destroying their income. Like that's how it was acting out. But each person thought the other person was wrong. And so these lessons continue to come up. And the good news is she followed her heart and her intuition, and she picked up the phone. And despite untangling everything I helped her with, she's like, Jewel, someone told me to call you. Something's not right. I can't see it. I'm doing everything with good intention. Help me. And I'm a very direct communicator. So I was like, boom, this is how it's acting out. This is how you're recreating your suffering cycle. It's like, no, you are the female. The female is the leader. The man is the head. So when women don't lead to the place that things are supposed to go, this is where we have dysfunction, because women are not stepping into their empowerment and being okay with, hey, this is the way it's got to go, and this is why.
Yeah, and we're seeing in relationships, interpersonal relationships at home, women are being challenged to stand up for themselves in ways they never felt they had to. They've been there 20, 30, 40 years, and they're saying, I am no longer willing to put up with this because now I have breast cancer, or now I have ovarian cancer.
And you don't have to wait for the cancer.
Right. And I'm watching friends of mine who have lived lifetimes of good people with oppressive suffering who've just cheerfully gone on no matter what, as their bodies, now they're gone. They're dead because their body didn't have the resources to protect itself and to heal itself.
Right.
And you can't, people have to recognize that it's not weak to have problems, but that's the hardest thing, to let yourself, especially if you have abuse from the past,
right,
but to let yourself be vulnerable to people, because you've got that physical, visceral contraction.
Well, and your masculine energy, because you're trying to protect yourself and you're trying to
at all costs
do things to get out of that, and it's really the opposite that gets you out of that.
Yeah, it's coming on these calls, and you and I talking and reaching out to people and creating community and saying, what, I need to put this first. I need to put my emotional, physical, and energetic needs first, like being the leader, and everyone else will benefit if I do. We were taught the opposite. Right. We were taught to sacrifice and to suffer because that's what makes a good person. But that's really what a lot of masculine needed to hear. They needed to hear, you need to soften, and women needed to hear, you need to stand up.
Right. And so I always think of it as the figure 8, which is why I always wear a ring that has the figure 8 in it. I have one that fits like 4 different fingers. And it's just because it reminds me that it's the center of the figure 8. that we're trying to get to. It's not good if we're all the way on the masculine side, and it's not good if we're all the way on the feminine side either. Like I learned that years ago with financial firms. Like there are all these financial firms with all these men in it, and it's like, oh my God, they don't listen to people's hearts whatsoever. And they're just driven by the numbers, and that's it. And are we maximizing return? Blah, 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 blah. And then I go into organizations that are all women, and in finance, all the women had turned butch. Like they're like militant, and you're like, well, where's the
And they're
softness
worse,
here?
and they can be worse because they've completely denied their feminine side, and their
Right.
families are terrorized, and I mean just all sorts of crazy stuff.
So you need that balance. You really need the balance, you know, and that's what creates that happy place.
Yeah, and here's a good visual that I really picked up a long time ago. If you think of a wheel, it when it's rolling downhill, it's off balance and catching itself back on balance, and off and on and off and on. So if you want to have movement, you're going to constantly be doing that figure eight. You're going to constantly being a little bit over here and adjusting, and a little bit over there and adjusting. You know, if you're staying in one place, you're going to be stagnant. And so you're always going to feel off balance, on balance, off balance, on balance, because that's how life works.
Right. It expands and it contracts, and it expands and it contracts. And the key is just keep getting back up on the horse.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
When you're contracted, relax. When you're relaxed, contract.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely fascinating journey, my friend. It is absolutely fascinating. And
scary too.
Yeah. But I want to remind everybody that it's really about going back to the dream, going back to what it is that you want to create. You know, I know in my relationship, the container, that part of being feminine is holding the container of what it is that you want to create. And I have held the container that I want to create the highest and best for me, for my kids, and my ex-husband.
Exactly. I was so glad when you made that decision.
Everybody wins then. And you know what? We don't need to know how that shows up. Like, I remember thinking that the highest and best may be that he's not a part of their lives. Maybe the highest and best is that he's fully engaged in their lives. And we don't know what is the best for other people's souls. We can only tune into what's best for us.
And if we do that, then 9 times out of 10, we're doing what's best for everybody else. Women don't trust that if they follow their intuition, that it's actually best for everybody. They think it's selfish.
Right.
You know, and when we tell people to break out of their suffering cycle, we mean stuff like, you know, go take a sauna, you know, go sit out in the woods. We're not even talking about anything that's really hard. We're talking about pleasure and putting yourself first, despite everybody telling, you know, trying to take little bits of your time or bits of your life.
Right.
You know, standing strong to put yourself first. And that's really what we're battling against. Not all this work we have to do, but the work we have to do is to love ourselves. And that's hard work, because that means we have to put down and get past all the judgments and all the fears we have and all the stuff people tell us. You know,
well, it's not only love ourselves, it's be ourselves.
Yes. And that's just as hard.
Like, particularly us women, we negotiate ourselves away on a regular basis. And it's funny, my physical body, literally my solar plexus, which is right above our belly buttons, when I am not in my power and being myself, that whole part of my stomach pushes up. It's crazy. Like, I've become so aware, and so, and my, even my, if you've got one of those backs that arches forward, guess what? You're giving your power away. That's what that means. If you're one of those people that you've got your shoulders shrunken, you're trying to protect your heart. Right? And you got to be in alignment. Like, this is where yoga comes so into play, because while we're trying to do this dance of life, yoga really physiologically realigns you.
Oh yeah. And that's why people come in and see me for body work, because, you know, we're able to retune you to get your body back in the harmony it's supposed to be. And recognize, I used to teach Feldenkrais. I got into Feldenkrais when I was in college as a musician. And I got to hang out with all the theater guys, and I, you know, had a theater background too. And it was all about movement and micro movements and breaths, and that stuck with me into my bodywork practice of how it just takes the smallest movements, the smallest adjustments for the whole system to adjust.
Yep.
It's uncomfortable for people because once you start adjusting your emotional self, your physical self starts changing too. And now suddenly, instead of being like this, your heart's vulnerable because you're standing up straight, and your soft underbelly is vulnerable, because you're not protecting it. It's not contracted.
Right.
And your pelvis is forward and you feel, the skanky, because now, you're showing up.
Funny thing is, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Suddenly you feel free, like you're a loose woman.
Yeah.
And that's
Free woman.
becoming a free woman. A free woman has always been seen as a loose woman. And we need to let go of the fear that we're going to be punished for being loose women and free women, and recognize that, yeah, there may be some blowback, but we're not alone. We've got a whole world of women behind us.
Right.
All of our ancestors, plus all of the consciousnesses we can tap into.
Like recently I'm being called, it's funny, it keeps popping up that I want to do like a belly dancing class or something like that. Like,
yes,
so it just moves, right? It just gets it all moving, gets it all going.
I do a lot of organ massage with people now. I do a lot of massage, acupressure work with their livers and their kidneys and their intestines, and getting their vagus nerve to relax. It's really fun because it's about bringing people's attention back to their core in a loving way, not in a "what the hell's wrong with you? I've got IBS." This is where all the stuff comes from, but in a oh my goodness, what would feel good? Would you like something warm? Would you like some tea?
Right.
In a gentle way, not a beating yourself with a stick way. Oh my God.
Right.
But what we all do,
that.
We have so much shame and guilt around who we are.
Huge. Well, and we're always apologizing for who we are.
Always, always.
And it's funny, I catch people now, like, by apologizing for who you are or not being able to take a compliment, all that, those little things are the things that are forcing you not to move on, because you're not accepting the compliment. You're not receiving the compliment. You're not allowing somebody to actually like open you up more. Instead, we go, oh no, like, come on, like we deflect it. Like we have to realize so much, like our words are so powerful. So powerful. And it's like, I hear women say all the time, oh, I'm sorry, I want to do this. I'm like, there's no need for you to be sorry. And they're like, what? I'm like, yeah, no need to be sorry. It's kind of like, we play this game with money where we're late for something, and then we don't want to pay for the whole hour that like we were supposed to be there. We want to only pay for 45 minutes of it, even though you scheduled the other person for an hour and they carved out an hour, but then you only want to pay for half the session because you showed up 30 minutes late. Like, this is how it acts out. And it's like, until you start, like, I remember hearing Marianne Williamson say that, God, it had to be 20 years ago. And right then and there, like, I run late, not as often as I used to, but that was part of I was overdoing, right? That was part of my shtick. And my acupuncturist, so it was my healthcare that always took the back seat to taking care of all my clients and my kids and all this other stuff. And I would always run late. And I would always pay her for the time. I'm like, hey, normally I'm in here for an hour, but because I was a half hour late, and she would always take me.
Yeah.
She would always take me. And I'm like, no, your time is valuable. And she would just look at me and shake her head. And I would just be like, no, because I know the money piece. Like, I want to stay abundant. I took your time. I'm paying you for your time.
And this is how women healers get into trouble.
Oh, totally.
It's so interesting, and I'm noticing it myself. We'll give of our time, we'll give of our energy, but we won't give of our money. And then we wonder why we have no money.
This cycle that we just have to stop.
Because we're giving, but we're not we're not being part of that cycle and that flow of money movement.
Right.
Because money is a flow, and you have to give, and then people give back to you. If you want somebody to buy your stuff, go buy their stuff.
Right.
Buy their jewelry, buy their book, buy, a session with them. And then they're more likely to want to buy yours. And that's how this community feminine energy works. It's not about dominating somebody and beating them into submission and taking all their money and running away, or cheating them or getting the best of them, or whatever we feel we need to do.
Right.
It's about giving first and being part of that community, not just of your time, but also of your money. If you've got $1, give $1.
But what I notice is that the people who naturally do that, they also block their receiving. And
Yeah.
that's typically the people who carry weight on their body, like a lot of weight, or they have really high anxiety because it's coming out in one of those two forms.
Yeah.
And so we have to realize that if we're giving, you need to make sure you're opening up on the receiving end just as much. Like I tease some of my really A-type personality clients. I'll tell them, I'm like, okay, now I know you're not supposed to hear this from your financial planner, but I'm just going to tell you it's from one lady to another. Like this is, don't go on top, be on the bottom. And they look at me and they're like, did you just say that? I'm like, yeah, the bottom's receiving, the top is like, you're in control. I'm like, and it's funny. I've noticed this pattern with A-type personality women. Like, no, they like to take charge. They like to do that. It's hard for them to do it the other way.
Well, because to receive, and this is something I don't think a lot of men understand, because they're all about invading, but to receive, we have to be vulnerable, very vulnerable.
Right.
We have to open ourselves up, and that means we have to have a lot of respect for ourselves.
Right.
You have to only choose to receive from people that you respect.
Right.
You don't take gifts from strangers that you don't like, because now you're encouraging a bad relationship.
Right.
So you're not always looking. I found this with my copy. I've been writing sales copy for my business for a long time, and I've gotten pretty good at it. And I noticed that I was getting women who were really, really desperate. Like, they needed to be checked into a mental health hospital, sort of thing. And that's who I was attracting. And, and I go, why am I not attracting other people? And then I looked at my copy and I said, oh, I'm sending out there that I only want to work with desperate people. I'm not putting out there that I want to work with strong, capable women,
right.
Who are just struggling with this one piece, who may have it figured out in other areas.
Right.
And it's standing up for our right to have the life that we want, instead of just taking what we get and making the best of it.
Right.
Looking for the opportunity that benefits us, instead of suffering and wondering why this is happening to me again. But I guess it'll be okay. I guess everything's going to turn out okay. It'll be all right tomorrow, I guess. That's the suffering cycle. Right. That's the cycle, the not looking out for yourself and what you want first.
Right. And you know what? That is the loving yourself. That is the being yourself. And it's so interesting as I work with different professionals, everybody brings their own flair, if you will, right? But you really whether it's relationships or your work or whatever, you have to follow your own inner knowing above everything and anything else. However that shows up, like you seeing the copy, right? You're going, oh, that wasn't my intention, but now I can see how that created that. And so now let me shift it, right? Because that's your knowing. You're like going, oh yeah, okay, it didn't come out exactly. And here's the other thing, allow yourself to learn. I say this to my kids all the time. I'm like, did you learn? They're like, yep, I learned. I'm like, great. Like, I don't want to get mad at the mistakes. I don't want to get mad. Like, I'm really, I am very much so in the educational system. I'm highly educated compared to most people. And it's really been an interesting journey with my kids in saying, like, I don't really care what grades you get. I want you to do the work, but they have to fold into being themselves. And I remember hearing Deepak Chopra say years ago, could you imagine what kind of world we would have is if every school taught the children just to work and focus on their strengths, and they can surround themselves with other people. Instead, we try to fix everybody's weaknesses. Our education system is set up to fix people's weaknesses. So we sit here and reinforce, you're not enough, you're not good enough, blah, 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 blah. You got to get better at this. And, I said to my one daughter is super creative, and she's like, Mom, my math is this. How can I have a mom like you? And my math is this great. I go, because you're off the charts creative and you're amazing and you have a very strong right brain and I have a strong left brain. I'm like, why does that make it wrong?
And then you
She's like,
find somebody who compliments you and, isn't a jerk to you.
right.
And and now you have something bigger than you. That's what
And
I
I
did.
said to her, I go, if you ever have math questions, you have a brother who's strong in math and you have a mother who's strong in math. And so you're good to go.
Yeah,
She's
I
like,
started to surround
okay.
myself with experts. I got you, and then I'm like, okay, I've got my financial advisor, and I've got my business coach, and I've got my investment coach, and I've got the rich dad, poor dad. You surround yourself with the people who know what they're talking about the topic they're good at. And
Right.
like, I'm good at relationships and you're good at money. And so that's why we naturally are attracted to each other. I'm like, I
Exactly.
got something you need. And you're like, you got something I need. We're like, let's talk.
It's beautiful.
That's how it's supposed to work
I
out. We're all
love
part
it.
of a bigger puzzle.
Well,
We're
and anyone, I just want to say that anyone who's watching, like, we are here to help. Any of you guys have questions or anything, I know I've got lots of you guys sitting here watching, but we want to answer your questions. We actually want to make change in your lives and help be the catalyst for that. So we want to help you on this journey.
Yeah.
So, I know I'm going to continue to do these 21-day challenges every quarter. Did I tell you I'm writing my new book? I'm
Oh, thank
excited. Should
you.
be out in the next couple months. And we have Rita and I have created all these tools and we have these opportunities, for you guys to plug in and so we can get you to this next place on your journey because you matter, right? That's why we're here. That's why we're sitting here chatting on Thursdays,
Right. Because a rising tide lifts all boats. And if something happens to somebody over on the other side of the world, because we are all interconnected, it means that their suffering affects me. And
Right.
it's my best interest to live in truth as much as I can and raise everybody up.
Mm-hmm.
And so we always find a way. And a way isn't necessarily charity. I get women who, talk to me sometimes and I'm like, no, we're going to challenge you to stretch, but in a way that isn't, devastating to you, not
Right.
in a way that destroys you. Instead of a way that, that's where I say, go get a massage already, not in a way that's overly painful. And we all think that healing means suffering, but healing really means pleasure and freedom. And if we can start associating that, people should be running to get help from as many people as they can as fast as possible because suffering is not necessary.
Well, we choose our suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And many people will look at me going, I didn't choose that. I didn't choose that. I'm like, maybe not consciously, but subconsciously you did because we're in our patterning, we're in our traumas, we're in our acting out process as opposed to our healing process.
Or maybe you didn't know what you were doing. A lot of women came from halfway decent households and then they walked into a narcissistic relationship and were totally blindsided because they didn't have the experience they needed. A good example is when I was in junior high, my brother passed away. Actually, I wasn't in junior high yet. I was like 9. My brother passed away. And that shut me down for a number of years. And I didn't have the experiences you're supposed to have with your family in junior high, you're supposed to
Oh,
have with
yeah.
your family in high school. The things where you learn who you are and that you can screw up, but people still love you, or, that somebody loses, their mind, but it's okay because everybody loves them anyways, or, all the Lifetime movie sorts of things, all those experiences we were supposed to have. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of women didn't have them. A lot of men didn't either. And so then we're stuck at that age of having to recreate the experience of being loved unconditionally, or except now you're an adult, nobody wants to do it. Nobody wants
Right.
to be that person for you. You have to be that person for you because now the things have changed. Nobody else is going to be your parent. You have to be your parent. And then you have to find other people who can help you be a part of a larger community. That's the only way out.
Well, and that's looking at, the second step in the process I walk everybody through is accepting the reality that you have created
Mm-hmm.
because you've created every ounce of it
Yeah.
for
Yep.
your soul to
Consciously or
get to the next
unconsciously.
place.
Yep. Yep.
And that's hard. That's hard for people's stomach. I remember when I was going through my divorce process, I was like, I didn't create none of it. Like, but of course I did. Of course I did. You know, my ego didn't want to admit
Yeah.
parts of it, right?
But,
But
but maybe you did because you turned left instead of right because there was an ice cream shop, down the left
well,
street.
I just did what I
Well,
knew,
good for
like,
you.
right? So I'm the second oldest of 12 children. I knew how to mother people.
Yeah.
I became a mother at like 5 years old. Like, my mom kept cranking out a kid annually for a decade after I was born.
Wow, you have
And
missed out on a lot of kid
I
experience.
didn't have a childhood,
Yeah.
right? I became responsible from the get go. So, me being responsible is so, of course, what did I attract? I attracted a relationship that I had to be uber responsible in,
Right. And who could
right?
teach you how to be irresponsible and to find
That was
compassion
the
for
attraction,
that. Yep.
right? People ask, why'd you marry him? I'm like, he was the fun guy. I was completely irresponsible and flying by the seat of my pants. It was the opposite, and it was the balance and the energy. He was
Yep.
always fun, always,
Yep. And
you
then you
know,
learned your lesson and you were ready to move on to the next step.
and none of it's wrong. That's what we have to understand. All of our journeys, not 1 ounce of it is wrong, not 1 ounce of it is bad. We just recognize going, oh, that's how I evolved. Okay.
Hmm. But it's hard to let go of those emotions, and that's what all the tools that we teach women, and men are about. Of how do you let go? How
Right.
do you surrender? How do you step into your power? Because the body says, "Oh no," and it tightens their stomach and it tightens their throat, and your stomach, pokes out, and mine curls in, and somebody else gets a headache. Our body's dragging us towards the pain and the suffering. And we have to
Right.
use these tools. We have to use what we know about how to make the body feel good and make the body feel good instead of just following that blind fear, that keeps us trapped. We have to
Exactly.
stop and do something nice for ourselves that legitimately reminds us that life is okay.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Well, Rita, how does everyone get a hold of you? Because the work you do for people on relationships is amazing.
Thank you. It's they can find me at ritahickmancoaching.com or on Facebook. I'm running a couple specials now. So if people just DM me and set up I'm doing free 2-hour calls. That way people can get a really good idea of coaching. They can get some good support through a problem that's coming up. And I'm looking for women who have had a certain amount of success in their life, but then they lost it
Mhm.
because of relationships or because of grief or something happened and they got stalled, and I'm here to bring them back to their original self, the one that they think is lost. So if there's any women who feel a little lost but know that they're in there somewhere, um, just direct message me. We'll get it sorted out.
Well, and certainly for me, go to juliemurphy.com, sign up on my newsletter list
Oh yeah.
because I have so many tools and so many things, with my new book coming out, we've got workbooks. Certainly depending on where you are in your journey, we're creating this whole series of, whatever life stage and life event you're in,
Oh,
how do we get you to that next place so that you can create that bridge with ease and grace?
oh my
Yes,
God. I
we
mean,
all
how
deserve it.
wonderful. It's a step-by-step manual. And you are the smartest woman I know about the metaphysics of money, how all of this works.
Yeah.
And just, I mean, for you to put your time and energy into creating, workbooks and step-by-step plans and support so women can get themselves out of that fear and that pain cycle around money. I'm just, what a blessing that you give so
Aw,
much of yourself. You've given
thank
so
you.
much to me, and I'm so grateful. And
Aw.
it takes a little time, but if you keep taking steps and realizing that's okay. What was I reading? If an easy path will almost always get harder, but a hard path will always get easier.
Right.
So if you decide to do some of the hard, scary things, it's going to get easier. If you
Yep.
just decide to go the same route people always have, is put the blinders on or start a fight or run away or work harder, then you're just going to keep getting the same
That's
and
true. You
hard.
have to show up differently to have different outcomes. Because if you change your outside world can only mirror to you what's going on in your inside world.
Yes.
That's why you have to go inside your heart and be authentic, be exactly who you are. So everything out here can reflect exactly who you are.
And if you don't know who you are, that's how we teach you how to get in touch with your body so you learn who you are. A lot of women come to me, they're like, I don't even know what I want. I don't even know who I am because they've disconnected. They've spent so much time in their head,
Right?
so little time in a safe, loving place in their body that they don't know
Totally.
what they want. They've just been
Yep.
following the rules all their life and they found some level of success and courage and they finally kicked out the jerk and they finally found a sense of freedom. But now what?
Exactly.
So,
Now, what is exactly what you choose to create?
yes, and that's what Julie and I are here to help you with. Okay, cool. Thank you so much,
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week. Lots of love.
guys. Bye.
Bye.